What's up guys, it's me CJS, and today I'm going to check out how My Little Pony handles racism. But before I start, I would like to say, yeah, I know I haven't posted in almost a month, which is not really what I wanted to happen. Like, I didn't want it to be 3 weeks. Like, I really want to upload more, and there will be more content in the future, not only reaction videos. For the people who don't know, no, this is not a reaction channel. I do reactions sometimes, but if you look at old videos of mine, there's also other stuff. I know a lot of the videos were deleted by me in the past, which I wish I hadn't done, but it was a different time and it was stupid. But I will re-upload most of them, as much as I can, hopefully all of them in the near future. But apart from that, there will be more videos and not just reaction videos. But let's just start with the video. How does My Little Pony handle racism? By Clopper Croix. Let's start.
Today we're talking about racism in a TV show for little girls about ponies. No, not that kind of race. Racism is defined as a form of prejudice that generally includes negative emotional reactions to members of a group, acceptance of negative stereotypes, and racial discrimination against individuals. In some cases, it can lead to violence. Thanks, Google, for that definition. I think we all know what My Little Pony's stance on racism is. It's bad, and we should be friends with people that are different than us. Alright, that's the video. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
No, we need to get this video to at least 8 minutes, so when I get monetized I can put mid-rolls in it. But how does My Little Pony discuss the societal issue, and how does it relate to the real world? That's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we begin, I do need to warn that there will be spoilers for My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, and beyond. And I'm also coming at this from a neutral perspective. I'm not like trying to push any political agenda on you, so please don't cancel me. Thank you. Anyways, let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. It has come to my attention that I have made an incredibly unfunny and cringy joke. I would like to apologize for any induced cringe you may feel after watching that segment, and I hope moving forward you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Thank you.
It's fine.
All the way back in December 2010 with the release of Friendship is Magic Season 1 Episode 9 Bridal Gossip. I would have been 5 years old and probably more mature than I am today. In this episode, the main six except Twilight are scared of this mysterious zebra that comes to Ponyville. They all have these crazy made-up ideas about her that aren't based on any logical facts. Eventually, Apple Bloom ends up going into the Everfree Forest after her. All of the main six step in this poison joke when Zecora warns them not to, and it results in this giant mess, but in the end they learn not to judge a book by its cover, or more importantly, judging a person based on their outside appearance. That was a very watered down description of the episode, but I think you get the gist. I think this episode did particularly well at getting its point across. There is this creature that the main six aren't familiar with, and they all have their preconceived ideas about. She looks different than us, and she lives in the scary Everfree Forest, so she must be evil. But it turns out that she has no bad intention at all. I think for us in the real world, when there is something that we don't understand, we are quick to assume the worst and create these stories in our mind to fill in the gaps of what we don't know. So instead of getting all the information about something, we just immediately jump to conclusions about the worst case scenario. But to play devil's advocate for a bit, how could they have known Zecora wasn't evil? What if she actually was out to get them? Well, I think there's a balance between staying safe and letting your mind fill in the gaps and gathering all the information. In this case, what the ponies could have done was go out and try to talk to Zecora to learn more about her instead of hiding from her. But having multiple go out instead of just one in case Zecora does have malicious intent. Drink some water. But just as a side note, I kind of feel bad for Zecora, as in future episodes, the main characters are always trashing her house and asking her for favors, but they never really do anything for her in return. I guess they learned their lesson not to judge her, but they still must think that they are superior to her. Now, I don't think that this is intentional, but it's kind of similar to the evolution of racism in the United States. If you're not
That
an
would be
American
mad.
idiot like me, who has been through over 12 years of American schooling, slavery in the United States wasn't abolished until the end of the Civil War in 1865. Black men weren't granted the right to vote until 1870, and all women couldn't vote until 1920. But the racism doesn't just magically go away since they are legal citizens now. States in the South would force poll taxes and literacy tests, and let's not forget about the Jim Crow laws, i.e. racial segregation. This took nearly a century to outlaw, but was that the end of racism in the United States? Nope. Racism is still a pretty big issue to this day with things like economic inequality, mass incarceration, housing discrimination, and much more. Like I said, I don't think this is My Little Pony's intent behind this, but it is kind of interesting to think about how racism changes over time and never seems to go away, even in the show. We'll discuss more on systematic racism in My Little Pony later on. Once again, I'm not out here trying to advocate for racism or anything like that. I think that it's kind of silly that the United States is one of the most powerful nations in the world, and yet there are still those who just can't accept people that are different from them. Drink some water.
Exactly.
I am going to pee the bed tonight. Moving on, our next episode that has been associated with racism is Over a Barrel, which is a pretty controversial one. Oh shoot, I'm probably going to get canceled just talking about it. But it all started when Scooby and the gang are going to visit Appaloosa to give Applejack's cousin this apple tree, but a herd of buffalo take the tree along with Spike. Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash go after them while Brayburn, Applejack's cousin, explains to the rest of the main six how the buffalo don't like the settler ponies planting all their trees where they traditionally stampede. Spike, Pinkie Pie, and Rainbow Dash get swayed towards the buffalo, while Applejack is in favor of the settlers. Twilight and Fluttershy are kind of neutral in the whole thing. So then they try to get the buffalo to talk to the ponies, but it doesn't really work. They end up having a battle, but the buffalo, like the apple pies, the ponies launch at them, so they agree that the settlers can have their trees if they give some apple pies to the buffalo. So this episode really focuses on colonization. The land technically doesn't belong to the buffalo, but they were there before
it's making me laugh,
settlers.
man.
It brings up a moral debate of who should actually get the land, the colonizers who needed to feed their people, or the natives who were there first. I think this episode really hones in on this fact because it's an important detail without being too biased towards either side. Now, I'm not a huge Wild West history buff. My mother once said that I should learn history in case I'm ever hanging around the dad of this girl I liked back in high school, but she has a boyfriend now, so there's no reason for me to learn it anymore. But dang, she was really nice and I completely blew it. Anyways, where I was going with that is how this whole thing is an analogy for the early United States, since there were Native American tribes that were here before the Americans started to colonize the country. And if you look into it, there were some pretty messed up things that the American settlers did to the Native Americans. Nowadays, there are still reserves in the United States for tribes of Native Americans. I think they must have felt bad for kicking them out of their homeland and doing bad things to them. This episode was pretty controversial when it first aired, since why are the ponies discussing this topic of everything they could do? I think they simply could have picked a different setting other than the Wild West with a different set of characters to still teach the same lesson of learning to peacefully negotiate and compromise in a moral dilemma. Overall, I think this episode is a good example of how racial tension can quickly lead to conflict. It also kind of touches on the importance of selecting good leadership, because the sheriff, who I guess is sort of like the leader for the settler ponies, and the leader of the buffalo both instantly choose to go to war over the land. But Little Strongheart and Brayburn are both willing to peacefully negotiate, although they never really get the chance to do so. I do plan to discuss this episode in more detail during an upcoming video about how My Little Pony handles war, unless I accidentally say a cuss word and I have to go to jail for the rest of my life and eat only broccoli and other vegetables. Anyways, now that we have discussed how ponies are racist towards the other species, let's talk about how ponies are racist towards each other in the season 2 episode Hearth's Warming Eve. So here's my Santa hat. Ho ho ho. This episode basically dives into how Equestria was formed and how the 3 pony tribes originally didn't like each other, but grew to accept each other. All 3 groups had their mutually agreed upon obligations to other pony tribes. The Earth ponies grew food, the unicorns raised the sun and moon, and the Pegasuses controlled the weather. But just because they had obligations to promote the good of all pony kind, that doesn't necessarily require liking each other. They were in the thick of it of winter, and the weather was really bad. The weather got worse as they fought more because of those pesky old Wendigos. They only come out when there is division between the ponies. But if you look up just Wendigos, this comes up. Thanks a lot, PBS. Now I'm going to have nightmares. All the leaders got together to figure out a solution, but they just end up arguing. The leaders and their assistants all journey off to find a new place to live where they can sustain their citizens, but it turns out that they all go to the exact same place. Bruh. The storm picks up once they start arguing again, so they are all forced to hide in a cave. They completely lose it over this rock, and the cave gets frozen shut along with the leaders. The assistants come to the realization of how pointless all the fighting and hatred is, and it ends up getting the Wendigos to go away. So then the country of Equestria is formed, and every pony lives happily ever after. Well, not really. They're still segregated into different regions of the country. Earth ponies primarily live in Ponyville and, I don't know, Appaloosa. Pegasuses live in Cloud City with Lobbit and Lando, and the rich fancy unicorns live in Canterlot. And they're still very quick to hate the other groups. We'll talk more about this later. And before you call me out for copying this video, I'm discussing racism in this video, not classism. And I've already kind of discussed this in my Pony Hot Takes video. But also, how did this video get so many views so quickly? I've spent 5 whole years of my life playing this YouTube game, and what the heck am I doing wrong? The most videos I've ever gotten on a video is with this terrible video about some scummy free Minecraft server hosting video. What am I doing with my life? But anyways, back to the episode at hand, or at hoof. I think something it handles well is unfit leadership. The 3 leaders of the pony tribes aren't the best. They really seem to only care about their own self-interest, and they are quick to blame others when really they were the problem at the end of the day, represented thematically by the Storm and the Wendigos. All 3 of the assistants are much more friendly and caring, so they would be much more fit than the current selfish leaders. But at the end of the day, I think this episode does well at teaching to put aside your differences and come together with your enemy to solve a much greater problem. So put this knowledge in the back of your brain, since we'll come back to it later. But for now, let's hop in our time machine and go back to the future in 2015 with the season 5 episode Hooffields and the McColts. I guess I have to get rid of my Santa hat now. Goodbye. 2015 is the year both of my best friends were born, my sister and Starlight Glimmer. That is really sad that my 2 best friends are my sister and a cartoon pony. But anyways, I just wanted to touch on this episode quickly, as I'm also going to be discussing it in the My Little Pony and War video as well, so make sure to subscribe if you're interested in that. It starts out with Twilight and Shutterfly getting called by the map to go to these 2 hills where these families are in a family feud with Steve Harvey between each other, but they don't even know why. They start fighting each other and Twilight Sparkle freezes them. Fluttershy tells them what caused the war in the first place. They all make up and live happily ever after, or at least I think. We never really see them again. So this technically isn't racism, as they are all Earth ponies, but it is extreme hatred of a certain group, so that's why I chose to include it. Besides, it's my video and I can say and do whatever the hey I want. But I think that this episode is a great example of how racism can get passed down from generation to generation. The Hooffields and McColts were probably hating on each other because it's just tradition at this point. Those who came before them probably did the exact same thing. And it seems like if you grew up in one of these villages, this feud would pretty much be all that you ever hear about, considering how close the villages are from each other. Eventually, someone needs to stand up to end the conflict and stop the cycle, or you need some outside source to realize how silly the fighting is. In this case, it'd be Twilight and Fluttershy, and in The Lord of the Flies, it'd be that naval officer that rescues them. Dang, screw ponies. I'm going to go make a YouTube channel about Lord of the Flies.
Where do you think you're going, mister?
Oh, I'm just going to start a YouTube channel about the Lord of the Flies.
I don't think you're going anywhere. Sit back down and read the lines.
Okay, fine, since you're my best friend after all. There's also a tidbit thrown in about how the Colts are good builders and the Hooffields are better at growing crops. So by working together with their specialized talents, they are able to mutually benefit, which kind of goes back to what we learned in Hearthswarming Eve. But if there's anything you learn from this episode, be sure to at least have a reason to hate people instead of just hating them to hate them. And now let's talk about the episode where Spike meets the changeling Thorax. So Twilight Sparkle, Spike, and everyone's favorite Starlight Glimmer all go to the Crystal Empire for some reason. I don't really know why, and it's not even relevant right now. Spike falls into a cave because he watched the Minecraft movie, and then he finds a changeling. He gets scared and almost falls into a bottomless pit, but the changeling turns out to be nice and saves him. Turns out this guy isn't like the other changelings. He just wants friendship. So Spike tries to get the Crystal Empire to accept this guy, but they don't budge. So since changelings can change, they must really like derivatives. Spike smuggles Thorax in, but he is disguised as a pony. But then Thorax tries to eat a McFlurry since it's changeling nature, just like telling me not to clop. I am Clopper Croix after all. And then he runs away, gets mad at Spike, they forgive, Spike does a musical number, and then the Crystal Empire finally accepts Thorax. The main takeaway from this episode is to not hate someone just because of the ones who came before them. Chrysalis and the other changelings gave changelings a pretty bad reputation in the eyes of the ponies, especially with shining armor and cadence. However, I think that the way that they responded to Thorax was completely justified. If someone is going to eat your baby, then yeah, I'm not going to take any chances with them. It makes sense that they don't accept Thorax at first, but this episode is a good reminder that not everyone is exactly like their people, and we should strive to be more welcoming to them. Think Rey in The Rise of Skywalker. Turns out she is related to Palpatine. Hopefully I didn't just spoil that for you, but it's been over 5 years, so that's kind of your fault, honestly. But just because she has that in her blood, that doesn't mean that she has to be evil. She can choose to be good. It's the same thing here with Thorax. Just because he is a changeling, that doesn't inherently make him evil. It just makes him related to people that are evil. I think that this applies to real life when it comes to stereotypes, which are widely held but fixed and oversimplified images or ideas of a particular type of person or thing. For once, that was not AI, it was the Oxford Dictionary. Stereotypes can be harmful though. Some examples could be that elderly people are forgetful, or all teenagers are lazy and rebellious. There may be some teenagers that are lazy and rebellious, but that doesn't mean that all teenagers are. Take me for instance, I'm technically a teenager and I don't think that I'm lazy. I don't sit around on the couch. Instead, I lift weights when I watch TV. And instead of gaming or going out drinking with the boys, I write really long essays about My Little Pony. Actually, I'm not sure which is worse now. There are obviously a lot more offensive stereotypes that I can't talk about in this video, but stereotypes aren't always true, especially if that's all you use to judge a person based on, like they did with Thorax. Alright, now let's move on to talk about my dad, Chancellor Naysay, and his episode School Days, spelled with a Z. So after the My Little Pony movie, Twilight Sparkle realizes how many other species there are in the world, so she decides to start a school to teach them all about friendship. Ponies go to school to learn about friendship. But it's not just for ponies, she wants to make it inclusive for all different kinds of species. But to gain accreditation from the Equestria Education Association, or EEA for short, it has to be run by all the guidelines. Twilight Sparkle tries to run the school by the book provided by the EEA, but disaster strikes. There are some new characters introduced in this episode which are referred to as the Young Six. They cut class when Naysay shows up and he decides to shut down the school completely. Then the changelings, griffins, yaks, hippogriffs, and dragons all storm off after Naysay calls them dangerous creatures. Naysay blames the failure of the school on how Twilight admitted creatures who weren't ponies to her school. So then in part 2, the best character basically tells Twilight to screw the EEA since she's in charge of all the friendship in Equestria, so the main six go to wrangle the young six, but it turns out they ran away. No, not that again. So then they track them down and it turns out they're in the castle of the two sisters. I wish I had two sisters that were hot. That is just wrong on so many levels. Anyways, they're here because even though the school shut down, they still wanted to be together. But then they get attacked by these porcupine things and Twilight and the gang save their little Angleside sides. They go back to the school and Twilight Sparkle hacks to break the spell that Naysay cast to lock the school. Then he comes back and gives us a Lord of the Rings reference.
None shall pass.
Twilight Sparkle convinces him that it's not an EEA school since it needs to be designed uniquely. And then Mama Celestia brings up Hearth-swarming Eve and how all the ponies united, so he lets them keep the school open. Overall, these episodes say a lot about racism and the education system as a whole. The Young Six are all different, and while Naysay thinks that this will be problematic, Twilight Sparkle sees how their differences can be the source of unique perspectives and strength. I really need water. I got like those bubbles in my mouth. You know, like when you haven't drank for a while and you've been talking a lot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's the stuff right there. We also see how large the tension between the different species in and around Equestria is. The parents or guardians or whatever of the Young Six don't seem to get along too well with the other species, but the kids are able to look past their differences and appreciate what makes each other special. Children have such an unadulterated and innocent outlook on life. They just see others that are different from them as potential friends. But eventually they inherit racism from their parents, friends, schools, all of that, and then the cycle just continues. Kind of like with the Hooffields and McColts. I think it also goes to show how some people are just inherently racist, as there are more and more people that choose to accept instead of hating, then eventually over the course of a few generations, the racism may eventually cease to exist. That never happens in this show though, since it's not all rainbows, cupcakes, and unicorns despite what one may think. I've also noted how these episodes also exemplify critical race theory, which is a framework for examining the ways in which race and racism intersect with law, society, and institutions. Of all the AIs I could have used for that definition, I chose GitHub Copilot. GitHub Copilot! Ultimately, the schools in Equestria are innately racist. They're exclusive to ponies only, and furthermore, they are pretty much tailored to each of the different kinds of ponies, stated by
Princess Celestia?
Unicorns studying magic, Pegasi learning weather, or Earth ponies researching agriculture.
Along with that, this is an example of critical race theory, since it's not just Neisei's personal prejudice against the other creatures, it's in the rules that are enforced directly by the EEA. And then Twilight Sparkle, in the face of despair, chooses to challenge the status quo and not fall victim to the system. While we're on the topic of equestrian society becoming more accepting of other species, we see how in the future during the last problem there are lots of other creatures than just ponies walking around. This is a great detail about how racism is dynamic, meaning that it isn't set in stone and the effects of it can go away over time. And this is really all thanks to Twilight Sparkle and her forward thinking with her school, putting friendship first instead of prejudice and discrimination. And then going back 2 episodes to the season finale, this 2-parter also kind of touches on racism as well. Remember when I said that the 3 types of ponies are still very quick to hate the other groups even though they put aside their differences to form Equestria? Well, that's what we're talking about now. So every pony is preparing for Twilight Sparkle's coronation, but Chrysalis, aka Cheese Horse, transforms into a unicorn and spreads
The fake news!
to this unicorn guy, and somehow it completely spreads like wildfire until Canterlot is completely a ghost town. Turns out this was a setup from Discord since he brought back all the baddies. No, not that kind of baddies. And then it's a pretty big mess and the unicorns, earth ponies, and Pegasuses are still mad at each other even though it's the end of the world. Twilight recognizes how the chaos is linked to the absence of friendship. They go back to fight the baddies, and when all hope seems lost, all the different types of ponies and creatures come together to help aid in the battle. Why? Well, it was the young Six and other students from the school who convinced their people to put away their grudges against the other types of ponies and creatures to fight a larger evil. They end up winning in the end and all of that. So I feel like we've already kind of discussed this concept to death in this video, but one thing it brings up is the influence of misinformation and fake news and racism. That unicorn was very fast to believe Chrysalis's lies, and it really tore up the unity between the different types of ponies. It's almost just as if they needed some reason to hate. It doesn't really matter if it's true, it just has to seem true. It shows that the different types of ponies, although they still may live together and get along with each other, they still have some prejudice against the others. Once again, this episode shows how children are more forward-thinking than the leaders. They were able to recognize what their leaders were doing incorrectly and how history repeats itself. This is just Hearth Swarming Eve all over again. It also provides some social commentary on how you can push and push and push for something like how Twilight advocated for friendship amongst different species, but no matter how hard you push, people will always go back to their instinctive ways. Think Lord of the Flies. I still need to start my Lord of the Flies YouTube channel. So then you think, oh, they finally come to accept each other and live happily ever after. Well, no. Although we never actually see it, there is a purge between Generation 4 and 5 where all the different kinds of ponies go back to hating each other again. Racism never goes away in this world, just like how it never seems to go away in our world. But you want to know something really weird? In most coding languages, when you define a Boolean, yes, that is my favorite word, it takes up 1 byte in memory instead of just 1 bit, even though that's all it really needs to represent true and false. Why is that? Well, it's for organizational purposes, since all the other common data types like integers, floats, strings, and characters take up multiple whole bytes.
What does that have to do with My Little Pony?
I ran out of things to talk about.
Why don't you talk about Generation 5 more?
Good idea, Kevin. Alright, so if you can remember back to 2021, it's hard to believe it's already been 4 years. Dang, I'm old. We had a new generation of My Little Pony, and it started with a cinematic release, cleverly named My Little Pony: A New Generation. and this movie focused on
The only good thing
racism.
about
It takes place
Generation
in the
5
bleak future of
is the
Generation
movie.
4. I think it's safe to say that this movie is basically a dystopian since the pony tribes live in fear of each other and a greedy corporation profiteers off of it. And there's no magic since there's no friendship, and since friendship is magic in this world, that basically means that they are doomed.
Except for a
I
few
Prevail
good
reference, but
episodes.
speaking
But
of I Prevail, I already miss old Brian, but whatever they're doing now is kind of
Generation
cool, I
5
guess.
ain't
So
mine.
this movie starts
Sorry.
out with an Earth Pony Sunny Star Scout, and she is, for lack of a better term, a brony, since she has little main 6 toys, and her father, don't get too attached to him, he inspires her to reunite all the different kinds of ponies. He dies, and then years later, Sunny Star Scout does a protest, and it goes horribly wrong. An unicorn, that sounds wrong. How about a unicorn named Izzy comes to the Earth Pony City of Maritime Bay, and every pony freaks
She's my
out
favorite
except Sunny,
character.
and they run away to the
From
Pegasus
Generation
Lego
5.
City. Then they get captured and meet Zip and Pip, who become main characters. They recruit Zip to their cause to reunite the ponies, and they need to steal Zip's mom's crown. Then the Sheriff Hitch comes to arrest them, but he ends up joining the cause, and they go to the Unicorn City. They dress up
movie was
as
nice.
unicorns and proceed to sing about their butts. So then Sunny plays Dance Dance Revolution against this alphabetal dude to get the unicorn crystal. Her horn falls off and they run out to try to combine the crystals to no avail. As a professional Minecraft server developer and software engineer who is constantly troubleshooting errors and things not working, they failed to acknowledge that there are 3 types of ponies. So in what world is combining 2 crystals going to work? Then comes my favorite moment of the movie because the animation here is just absolutely beautiful. Then Sunny Star Scout finally
It
got
really
my
is.
text about there being 3
That's
crystals,
definitely-
and she finds the Earth Pony one in her house. But she still ignored all the texts about dates I asked her out on. So now she has to combine all 3, but Sprout goes savage and wrecks Sunny's house in the process. She combines them, but once again, it doesn't work. The ponies realize in the end that it's not the physical act of reuniting all the crystals, but instead they all need to come together and choose friendship over hating each other. So then Sunny Star Scout grows a horn and wings to sell toys, and all the magic is back. The end. Well, no, not really. No, there's a lot to unpack here. This movie did take place a little more than a year after George Floyd's tragic death and the I Can't Breathe movement. However, I don't believe that this is what caused Hasbro to make this movie, since it takes several years to make a cinematic movie. However, racism was a growing issue throughout the late 2010s, so it makes sense that this is what they chose to go with. People have also criticized this movie for being woke. If you somehow don't know what that means, it's a piece of media that is alert, aware, and attentive, especially to issues of racial and social justice. It has also been used to refer to a broader awareness of political and cultural issues. Once again, I'd like to thank Google AI Overview for that definition, as well as writing this whole video. Haha, that's a joke, but my AI video did do pretty well. Not as well as that classism video though. Anyways, I personally don't think that this movie is woke per se. Granted, it is talking about racism, but it just doesn't explicitly push a woke political agenda or anything like that. It's just a lesson about accepting groups of people that are different from you. I guess now that I put it that way, it does kind of sound woke, but the way they went about it didn't really feel woke. Oh, drink some water. So then, when I am awoke, I'll have a wet bed. Something that this movie also touches on are stereotypes. Sprout says that in school, the Earth Ponies learn that the unicorns will zap them with their horn lasers and fry their brains, as well as something about the Pegasuses. I was too tired to look it up when I was writing this. Oh my gosh, this video is scripted? Now, we obviously know that they're not going to fry their brains, so this was a very harmful stereotype that they were indoctrinated into believing by the schools.
Well, that is kind of what our teacher said in history class.
But since they were taught it at a young age when the mind is growing and much more impressionable, they're going to grow up believing that and live in fear all their life. This is very similar to the Hitler Youth, which was a group of children that Hitler indoctrinated into becoming Nazis, since kids are so much more likely to live something out if they're taught it at a young age. See, I know a little bit about history, but that still doesn't change the fact that she has a boyfriend. Going right along with that, something else that is touched on in this movie is how there are certain entities and corporations that perpetuate racism to profit from it. This is seen in Sprout's mom's business, Cantor Logic, which makes products for Earth Ponies to stay safe from Pegasuses and unicorns. All these products are useless junk, but you know that ponies are buying them since they are scared. Do you think that Cantor Logic wants to end the racism? Well, no, they're making lots of money from it. So yeah, of course they're going to want to keep brainwashing people into buying their products. This is kind of like the song Race War by Tom MacDonald and Adam Calhoun. They discuss how they want us in a racial war for their personal gain, that being entities such as corrupt politicians in the government and corporations like Cantor Logic. If you do decide to go listen to this song, keep in mind that they do say some offensive stuff that doesn't represent the views of this channel. I only bring this up to discuss the point of how it aligns with My Little Pony's viewpoint on how we all need to stop fighting each other over very trivial things that they want us to be concerned with and instead stand up to the malicious people that keep us hating on each other. But overall, although this lesson is kind of predictable and cliche at this point, I think it serves as a good reminder for us to, well, not be racist and accept other people that are different from you. Alright, this video took me ages to write. I'm honestly not sure how I had like 16 pages to write about ponies being racist, but if you've made it this far, I just want to say thank you for watching this video. It really means a lot to me. I hope you learned something from it. And I know that this was a bit more serious than my other videos. I'm experimenting with new forms of videos to break the pony YouTube algorithm and go viral like that darn classism video. If you'd like to talk to other people about ponies, feel free to join my parents' basement Discord server. Please also subscribe for more videos about ponies, but until next time, I will see you on the other side, and happy clopping. Hey mother, are you racist?
Well, yeah.
Well, that was a great video, and I'm sorry that I wasn't very present throughout this video. It's just it's very hot here, and I'm sweating, and yeah, it's just very hot, and I'm already very tired. But yeah, it was a very great video, definitely. And yeah, it's true, like there are a lot of controversial episodes, especially like season 1 with the buffaloes and all that, but I think these episodes are also important, you know, because you just don't get that in cartoons nowadays. At least it's very, very rare. And yeah, that's why I like season 1. Season 1 is one of my favorite seasons, and I don't care what anybody says. I think season 1 was great, and a lot of people think so too. So yeah, this was a great video. Don't forget to subscribe to Clopper Croix and subscribe to this channel, CjS. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.